Okay, so I'm going to go over workshop 2 real quick. So the assignment she gives us is titled road trip, and there's 3 things of input that she's going to give us. She's going to give us the length of the road trip, and it's going to be a positive integer. So we're going to put that in the program as int or int. And then the average speed while driving, that's going to be a positive real number. So that tells us that it's going to have to be a float. And then the amount of rest time in minutes during the road trip will be a non-negative integer. So that's going to also be int. And I'm going to do a separate program that's going to be very similar to this one. I just don't want to get like too close to the actual assignment. But this should give you guys all of the tools that you need for your assignment. So what I have here is it's going to be plane speed and time as the input, and you're going to output the distance. Okay, so this is going to be very similar. You won't have the same equation, but this is going to show you the tools you need to solve the workshop 2. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first thing we need to look at is our input, and we have time. So we're just going to set up an integer of time like so, and we can just call it time. And then our second input is going to be plane speed, and this one we're going to do is the float. So float, and we'll just call it speed. All right, and then our output, we need to set up a data type for the output, and that's going to be in miles, and we need to make sure we do float for that as well, and we'll call that distance. Cool. All right, so now what we need to do is set up our print statements to just prompt the user as she wants, to prompt the user to enter the time traveled and then enter the plane speed. Obviously, it's different than in what's in the assignment, but it's the same idea. So I'm going to do printf, and we'll do enter time traveled, and we'll put a line feed, and then we're going to do scanf, and we're just going to scan for the integer. So that's why we did %d, and make sure you do your ampersand and then time. And then we're going to do a print statement for the plane speed. So enter plane speed, and we'll do a line feed. I'm also going to do a line feed at the beginning here, and that's just going to make it a little bit cleaner. So then we're going to do our scanf statement for the plane speed, and that's going to be %f. Make sure you do %f for float, so it scans it as a float, because it's looking for a float, by the way. When you put in speed, the integer, it wants to see it scanned in as a float, because it's not an integer, it's a float. So we have that there, and then we're going to do our equation, and distance equals rate times time. So we're just going to write out distance, because that's what we set our data type as. Equals speed times time divided by 60. And I'm going to leave it as 60 for now, and then show you what's going to happen if we leave it at 60, okay? And then we're going to do our print statement, and we'll do a line feed and then distance. And I think she just wants the output solely as the number, but I'm going to leave the output as distance just so you guys can see it kind of happening here. And then she wants it to 2 decimal places, so I'm going to do that. I'm just going to do 0.2 to signify I want 2 decimal places, and then f for float. Okay, cool. Then we're going to go outside the quotes and put in distance, because that's what we want it to print. Awesome. So let's go ahead and build this program. Okay, no errors. So let's run it. So enter time traveled. Let's say we traveled 150 minutes like her input, and then enter plane speed. We'll say 60 miles per hour. So we converted 150. So let me pull up a calculator real quick to show you guys where the program doesn't really go wrong, but what you need to fix if some of you might have trouble when doing this. So we're going to enter in 150 minutes, and then we'll divide that by 60, and that's going to give us 2.5. So 2.5 hours multiplied by our rate, which is 60 miles per hour, and that gives us 150. So that doesn't give us our 120. So what I want to show you what's going on in the program is our time is an integer, and 60 is also an integer. So whenever you have in C, whenever you have an integer times an integer or an integer divided by an integer, it's going to spit out an integer and not a float value. So what really happened when it did 150 divided by 60 is it took 2 as the value. Okay, because 2 is an integer, and then it multiplied that by 60, and that's why we get the 120. So what we need to do in our program to fix this is real simple. Instead of making the integer time into a float, we want to keep that as an integer because in the assignment she wants you to keep the time rested, I believe it is, or maybe average speed as an integer. So we're going to keep that as an integer, and all you have to do is go over here to whatever number you're dividing it by and change this to 0.0f. And so now this is treating this as a float value. And so when you divide the integer time by 60, 0.0f, it's going to spit out a float. So if we rebuild this program and run it, enter time traveled, we'll do 150 minutes, and then 60 for the plane speed, and it gives us 150, which is our answer. So there you guys go. That's a real simple kind of program to teach you how to go about doing Workshop 2. So I hope that's helpful.